Woo, pew, 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 pew.
When the archive took you at the behest of your family, you agreed to undergo our discipline, our lifestyle.
I didn't agree to shit. You took me in because I'm assuming my father paid you a pretty nice sum of coin.
Anything else you guys wish to do over the next few weeks?
I would like to try some chemical altered states.
Wait, is this with the shrooms?
Yeah. Oh, just before dusk.
I'll join you.
What is the nature of the goods you have?
I have no idea.
Well, hello. Greetings, travelers.
Well, there's something I need to go do. You guys can do this. No, Yasha, no, you always do this. No!
The edges of your vision begin to cloud, and as you sit for a moment, your body begins to feel a bit weird. Kind of nausea creeps in a bit. and the coloration of your vision in this area becomes almost like a gray, colorless, you know, black, white, and gray tone.
How do you feel? Do you see anything? Is it interesting?
I think it kind of sucks.
We're gonna work on it.
But it,
Guys going on a wall. Ba-da-da-da. Good morning, Erica. Good morning, Vale. It's hoppin', it's hoppin'. Boy, I had a good game of D&D yesterday. I tell you what. Defeated a legendary Hydra. Resolved the main backstory trauma of the party bard. And the rest of the party finally clued in on the fact that my character has been carrying a cursed greatsword for quite some time. My character also being the party cleric. So, you know, kind of important that that get resolved. Second part of Fear Street. I am not familiar with Fear Street. Although I was a huge Goosebumps reader back in the day, so it's possible I just forgot the title. Aha. Late 70s, early 80s. Almost as many YA Fear Street as Goosebumps. Wow. Yeah, this completely slipped under my radar. I didn't know that. I suppose it probably depends on whether you count per book or just total books sold. Total books sold would make sense. I don't think it sold as many per book as, Harry Potter. Yeah. Now, I will say that only a few years ago, Lord of the Rings was the best-selling book series of all time. And I do know that the last time I looked, although I don't know how they're doing the metrics, right? So like Goosebumps could still be up there, but Lord of the Rings was the top, and that Wizard School series, you know, bumped Lord of the Rings the last time I was paying attention to that sort of stuff. Vale. God damn it. Okay, all right. I don't have time to do my full attempted 3 hours today, but I'm gonna try and get through 2 chapters, and that's what we're gonna do. Yeah, yeah. No, I saw that became the top a while ago. Which, you know. Chapter 5. The Rustening Verge. Hey, awesome, Erica. Chapter 5. The Rustening Verge. The next day the storm lessened. They pressed on through a lighter rain that could not soak through their oiled cloaks, but some hours before sunset, something else brought them to a halt. Hey, that's still progress, Erica. They came suddenly upon a blasted land. There were no trees, only blackened stumps thrusting impotently out of tortured dirt. The river was visible some ways off to the north, but other than that, the land was featureless in every direction. The lovers huddled closer to Flip and Horace as though frightened. "What happened here?" said Omby. "It must have been a fire," said Horace. "It looks recent." "It wasn't recent," said Flip. "I traveled here once before, and I learned the story of this region. The folk who once lived here called it the Breeze Boughs, and scholars who lived 1,000 leagues away and had never seen it named it the Southern Forest of Mist. It was home to a wizard king, one of the last, a man named Perrin. Like all his kind, he was an eater of mage stones." The others looked to him in confusion, all but Sylvan, whose jaw tightened. "Mage stones," said Kara. "What are they?" "You might say were, for they're not to be found anymore," said Flip, "or at least they're so heavily outlawed that even talking about them can land you in prison. Remember that, please, and never speak of them in company you do not trust, for I should hate to be responsible for getting you in trouble with the King's Law. They're black crystals, and any wizard who eats them gains unimaginable power. That's how the Wizard Kings ruled the 9 kingdoms." Ruled them and almost destroyed them, said Sylvan. Flip smirked, Mayep. In any case, the High King Andriana outlawed their use long ago on pain of death. She sent her mystics forth through Underrealm to depose any king who disobeyed her. King Perrin fought his last stand here, with many mages by his side. Mage stones turned their flames black and terrible, and they scarred the land forever, as you can see. In the end, it was not enough. Perrin was slain, though many of the mystics fell before he did. It's only a pity he did not wipe them out. Outline figuring out writing commencement day. Oh boy, that's a toughie, Erica. I figure you start whichever way. So, first of all, you have two options. You have a binary choice, right? So here's how you make a binary choice when you can't decide what to do. Flip a coin. Now, flip a coin, and if it comes up heads and you're like, okay, good, then start on whichever option was heads. And if it comes up heads and you're like, oh, then do tails. I love that trick. When you can't decide between two options and you're like, all right, I'm going to flip a coin. And then you flip it. And if you're happy with the result, then you do the result. And if you're unhappy with the result, then you've made your decision. And you ignore the result. But then, let's say you start on whichever method you choose. You go in on it. You're working. You can just be like, hey, this isn't fucking working out for me. And then you can just not do it. You can switch and try the other method. The house always wins that way. A bitterness seemed to be rising in Sylvan, and it filled the air with a palpable tremor like the sky before thunder. If Perrin had won, it would have spelled the doom of Underrealm, she said. Flip's lip curled, and his eyes took on a dangerous light as he looked upon her. Are you a lover of mystics, then? The bitterness in Sylvan's eyes flared to anger. Hardly. But the days of the Wizard Kings were the darkest chapter in Underrealm's history. Not all folk have forgotten the evil they committed across the land, even if you have. I've forgotten nothing, said Flip with a razor smile. I'm nothing but glad Perrin died. I'm only happy he took so many redbacks with him. I never much loved the Order. Because of your cousin, said Sylvan. Both Flip and Oris turned to her incredulously. How in the dark below do you know about that? Said Flip. Some of Sylvan's anger had faded, and now she smirked. I told you from the start my master knows a great many things. Do you think he would have sent me chasing you across Underrealm if he did not? The lovers seemed to sense the danger building. Ombi took Flip's hand. What happened to your cousin? He said gently. Ombi, warned Oris. No, there's no reason they shouldn't know. Flip kept his gaze on Sylvan. My cousin was leading a caravan through Sylvan. He was waylaid in the night. Everyone was killed, butchered. My family thought bandits did it, but they never found out who. I'll be cleaning my office, directed from my wife this morning, who said, and I quote, clean this place up, while vlog and novel speed reads and classical music plays in the background. That sounds like a pleasant morning, except for that douchebag speed reading in the background. My family thought bandits did it, but they never found out who, so I went there myself against my mother's wishes. I found a mystic badge trampled in the dirt near where the caravan had burned. The 3 rods, the circle, and the wings. Not enough evidence to convince the king's law, of course, but then why would they arrest their own? The red cloak slaughtered my cousin and all his attendants. He was barely even grown. He tilted his chin up slightly as he regarded Sylvan. Remember that when you think of the mystics and their heroism. Sylvan had not looked at him while he told his story, but now she met his gaze. I was only 9 years old when the mystics killed my parents. Oris's lungs felt suddenly empty. Flip blinked twice. What? He stammered. They came in the night, said Sylvan. They dragged my mother and father out into the street and gutted them. And then they did the same to the rest of my village. Everyone I had ever known. In the dark and in their bloodlust, they were about to kill me too. Then one of them realized I was only a child. I do not remember much else of that night. In time, it was arranged for me to be taken in by a nobleman, my master, who I have mentioned before. It was he who saw to my education and my training. They all let the silence hang for a moment. Then Flip went to her and put a hand on her shoulder. Dark take them, he declared. Them and all those of great wealth and power. They value our lives only as coins to be spent to achieve their own ends. Sylvan gave him a bitter smile that looked ready to shatter. As you say. 2 days later they woke to another terrible storm, but this time they had no snug cave to keep them safe from the sky's fury, so they huddled wearily into their cloaks and pressed on through the wet. They had passed through the blasted land and back into forest, but the storm was so terrible that the trees provided little protection against it. As the hours passed and the weather showed no signs of lessening, Oris grew worried. Marching through this all day could easily make one of the party ill or even cause an injury. Flip seemed to feel the same way. We can't go on all day this way, he said. Let's build a camp and try to weather it. Our tents will be no proof against the rain, said Oris. We will only be... We'll only be sitting still, which will make the cold worse, and then our tents will remain soaked the rest of the trip. Can you do anything? Said Ombi, looking pleadingly at Flip. I'm not Doran and cannot command the sky, said Flip, scowling. Suddenly Sylvan's eyes flashed. Not Doran, but mayhap there is something you could do, she said. You're a wizard of some strength, are you not? Flip looked at Oris and rolled his eyes. I'm strong enough for my purposes and the purposes of some others, he said. Why? Can you build a roof of water, she said, using the rain itself? I've seen it done before. Flip frowned. A roof? If the runoff... I would have to... One moment. He stepped away from them all. As he muttered an incantation, his eyes filled with a bright glow. From the raindrops all around, he formed a small globe, and then it grew larger and larger between his twisting hands. Soon he flattened it and lifted it so that it was over his head, and then it began to grow. Soon it was 2 paces wide, and the lovers dove beneath it with happy cries. A moment later, there was room enough for Oris and Sylvan to step out of the rain as well. When drops struck the roof, they joined it, and Flip shaped it so that there was a steady runoff at the back, splashing none of them. It was like being under an awning at the home of some wealthy noble, able to observe the weather without suffering from it. They all cast back the hoods of their cloaks and took deep breaths of relief. You are wonderful, cried Ombi. He threw his arms around Flip's neck and kissed him on the cheek. Hey, morning, Kanahura. Long time no see. Remarkable, said Sylvan, looking appraisingly at Flip. I have suggested this trick to others, but you are the first who could pull it off. Am I really? Said Flip with a grin. His eyes still glowed as he held the water shape in his mind. And where did you say you learned it again? She did not answer, but only smiled wider and looked again at the rain. Wisdom may be found in many places, not just the academy. Ah, see that little linky poo there? So I'm gonna try. I'm gonna start trying to do this trick in my books. So this is the first book in a series, right? A new series, and I assume most people who read it will be people who have read the previous Underrun books, but there will, of course, be some new readers. And so this is a link to the Academy journals. Actually, let me make sure it goes to the right place. Yeah, there it is. Oh, actually, no. Should probably go here, right? Morning, Danny. Hey, congrats on finishing your degree, Kanahura. That's amazing. Yeah, I should go to this page instead, because this is the whole series, not just the first trilogy. Fine, said Flip, rolling his glowing eyes, but just now I seek shelter and not wisdom. There must be somewhere more permanent we can hide from the rain and dry off, at least for a time. A flash of lightning split the sky. They all shielded their eyes and blinked, all except Kara, who pointed instead. Look, she said, what is that? No, we're not going to get citations. It's just links to the other series, so that when the Academy gets mentioned for the first time in the book, a new reader can be like, why is there a link here? Oh, there's a whole series about the Academy. That seems cool, blah, blah, blah. Fine, said Flip, rolling his eyes. But just now, look, what is that? They all peered through the storm. They're far in the distance. From a distance. Far in the distance there was a black shape atop a ridge. Oris could not be sure, but it looked like a building and a large one. What under the sky? Muttered Flip. There's no towns out here that I remember. Another flash of lightning struck, and Oris saw high stone walls. Not a town, she said. A stronghold. So far from any settlements, said Kara. Sylvan's expression had grown troubled. We should avoid it, she said. There are many such places in these lands, but they were abandoned long ago. Now they are dens of bandits or wild animals. Even in the best case, it will leave a trail for those who hunt us. Privately, Oris agreed with her, but, too, she knew that secrecy would do them no good if they froze to death or perished from illness in the wilderness. Suddenly a bolt of lightning split a nearby beech tree with a terrible explosion. The lovers jumped and screamed, and the light died in Flip's eyes. The roof of water fell on all their heads, soaking them straight to the skin. That settles it, said Flip as he scrambled to rebuild the water ceiling. You may do as you like. I'm getting a stone roof over my head. He set off for the stronghold at a brisk walk, and the lovers scrambled to keep up. We can think up a better plan when we are there, Oris told Sylvan, but at least we shall have 4 walls to shelter in, or perish inside, said Sylvan darkly, but she followed along regardless. It took them 2 hours to reach the stronghold, slipping in the mud and cursing all the while. The path up the ridge to the stronghold cut back and forth. Oris reflected that if the place were occupied, it would have been in an excellent position of defense. Every turn in the path was under the stronghold's arrow slits, glaring at them like watchful eyes. The top of the main keep had fallen partially to ruin, but there was a mighty watchtower that looked to be intact. The front gate stood open, much to their relief. Across the bailey, the door to the main building yawned wide and dark. There might once have been a wooden door in the frame, but it had rotted away or been removed long ago. They crowded into the entry space within. The lovers went to sit against the wall, heaving great sighs of relief. I think the sky, said Flip. Now if we could only get a fire going, this place could almost be pleasant. But you are a fire mage, said Alby. Flip smiled down at him. I need fuel, my darling, for I can't burn stone, and it wearies me to burn only air for too long. I'll find some wood, said Oris. There must be some old furniture we can use for the purpose. I will come with you, said Sylvan. This place has an evil feel, and you should not go alone. Let me go with her, said Flip. She'll need my magic to light the way. Sylvan's jaw looked hard as iron. I am not letting both of you out of my sight. Sylvan's jaw looked hard as iron. I am not letting both of you out of my sight within this place. Flip rolled his eyes. Then all 3 of us can go. Oris grimaced. I don't think we should leave the lovers alone, Flip. Just go, cried Kara and Ombi in unison. These fucking people are my favorite people. Both lovers made great shooing motions at the trio. We will freeze to death here while the 3 of you argue, said Ombi. Be quick about it. If you hear us screaming, you will know a bear has lumbered into the room. Come and save us quickly. Oris had to smile at that. Very well, she said. We'll return as quickly as we may. As the lovers sat resting against the stone wall, Oris, Flip, and Sylvan left their packs and set off into the darkness of the stronghold. So what do you know of this place, said Flip. You seem to have some idea of its reputation. Sylvan never took her eyes off the shadows around them. Long ago, many strongholds like this one were built in this land, which was once called Forland. Underrealm was young, and this was once its frontier. I mean, that's not the way I imagined the scene, Danny, but also, you are not wrong. The scattered folk who dwelled here at the time were descended from hedgemen, and though the Hedis chiefs were reluctant to face wrath upon the field, the farmers here fought like they had battalions at their backs. Roth's general was Sylvan, daughter of Ren of the Sunmane, for whom the kingdom of Salvan was named, and so was I. And she built these fortresses in this wild land to keep the south border secure. But as time went on, and Dorsey and the other kingdoms were conquered one by one, the strongholds fell into disuse. New roads built by new kings avoided them, traveling across open country to more directly join the towns and cities that were no longer in constant danger of being raided. Thus these places were abandoned and forgotten, though some old maps still contain them. I would need to look at one to be sure, but I think this stronghold was once called the Rustening Verge. Flip looked impressed, and he made no attempt to hide it. I'm not the only one with some knowledge of history, it seems. Sylvan smiled, but it looked grim. My master ensured I was well educated, but then her smile vanished. Oris, what is it? Oris was staring at something. They had passed through 2 hallways into a large chamber that looked like it might once have been a dining hall. One door to the north surely led to the stronghold's bailey, and there were 2 hearths set in the southern wall, empty and cold. There were no old pieces of furniture to be found, but Oris had seen a crumpled bit of cloth in the corner that looked like a fallen tapestry. She had been walking towards it when she froze in place. It looks like a nest, said Oris. There's no reason for her to... It looks like a nest, said Oris. Flip and Sylvan came to her side, studying the fallen tapestry. It was crumpled up and curled in a sort of ridge around the edges, forming a soft place to lay in the center. It did indeed look just like a nest, of some beast larger than a human, but Oris knew of no beasts that size that made themselves nests like this. Could it be a bear, said Flip? Mayhap, said Oris, though she shook her head, but they don't often den in places like this. They do not, agreed Sylvan, creeping closer. She knelt and then stood with something in her hand. Look, a bone. The gore on it is still red. Dark, spat Oris. What? Said Flip. Who cares if it's red? It hasn't had enough time to dry out, said Oris. She turned and drew her sword. It glimmered in the faint gray sunlight shining through the windows of the dining hall, which were 5 paces above the ground. Sylvan stepped up beside her, bearing her own steel. So it's recent, said Flip. His eyes glowed as he muttered under his breath, and flames sprang to life in his other palm. Something lives here, something that hunts, said Oris. We should not have come, said Sylvan. Let us get the lovers and leave as quickly as we may. But what is it, said Flip. If we can kill whatever beast this is. Hist, said Sylvan suddenly. Hist, said Sylvan suddenly. That's a little too much alliteration. Sylvan's whisper was so harsh that Flip listened. She cocked her head. Or saw her arms twitch as though she wished to move, but restrained herself. She turned to the two of them, her expression one of dread. Not a beast, she said. From the front hall where they had left the lovers, they heard a long and piercing scream. Alien intro music. Okay. One more chapter, but I am going to refill my coffee. Oh, coffee, coffee, coffee. Disaster. Megan drank the rest of my coffee, so I had to put on a fresh pot to brew. I mean, I know I'm just a trophy husband, but like, I feel like I deserve a little more respect. Chapter 6. Wait. I know what you mean, Danny. Leans against the wall, head down, all nonchalant. I know what you mean by that, but here is what I picture when you say that. Danny? How you doing, girl? No, nothing. No, you know, just being cool. Just everything's fine. Cool. Chapter 6. Shadow in the Tower. Oris's pulse thundered in her ears as they sprinted through the stronghold. Thoughts raced through her mind, each vanishing in an instant. It was some beast. It was a monster from Campfire Legend. It was more enemies like Enfield, and this time they did not care about the lover's safety. One thought kept repeating. Sylvan knows what it is. They burst into the entry hall. All three of them froze in horror. Ombi lay on his back on the floor. His chest was torn open, and his eyes stared sightlessly at the ceiling. Something crouched over Kara. Her legs stuck out from beneath it, and they were kicking feebly. Oris could not tell what the thing was in the darkness. There was something bear-like about its thick, shaggy fur, but the limbs were too long and gangly, and the way it had ripped Ombi apart. No, it was not a bear. All this she saw in the space of half a heartbeat. Then she, Flip, and Sylvan charged, screaming and brandishing weapons in flame. The creature turned and snarled at them. Oris saw bared, yellowing fangs. Its eyes glinted unnaturally in the pale sunlight. Then the creature snatched Kara up in one massive claw. It scuttled up the wall and out through a hole in the masonry there, disappearing outside. Kara's screams went on until eventually the sound of the rain drowned them out. No, cried Oris. She raced back and forth beneath the hole in the wall, trying to catch another glimpse of the thing. What in the dark below was that? Flip's voice was high and shrill. He swung back and forth, waving his flames at the darkness. Sylvan ran to Ombi. She knelt to inspect him, but Oris could tell from even so far away the lover was dead. Oris fixed Sylvan with a look. You know. Sylvan's gaze leaped up to her. Her jaw leaped up to her. Her jaw clenched tighter. I have only a guess. Well, guess then, screeched Flip. He's such... Oh, my fucking... I love Flip so much. I love Flip so fucking goddamn much. My precious twink shit goblin. Its nest was almost bestial, but not quite, said Sylvan. It attacked without provocation, but otherwise it was like an animal. I think it is a fallen weremage. That meant nothing to Oris, but Flip's face went even paler. Dark below, he whispered. What? Said Oris. What is that? A weremage that... Flip shook his head and licked his lips. It is a long-tailed... I like it. Flip has an unintentional speech affect that I didn't really mean to give him, but like his... This is actually something that happens to me all the fucking time, where my brain goes faster than my mouth. And so I start a sentence like 3 or 4 times and say several different things before I go, I stop and pause and I'm like, okay, here's what I'm trying to say. Anyway, so now in this final editing pass, I'm actually trying to enhance it a little bit to like turn it on more. You know what I mean? It's extremely dramatic. I don't know that Flip... I think Flip is very aware of how dramatic he is, and I think he revels in it. I think he's like, this is my thing. A weremage that... they failed to... Flip shook his head and licked his lips. It is a long tale, but the heart of it is that all magic is dangerous. Fledglings learning its use must take every care not to harm themselves or others. In a student's later years at the academy, half of all instruction teaches them to avoid the dangers of their own spells, so that you do not set yourself ablaze or some such, said Oris. Or some such, said Flip, nodding. Though there are worse things than fire. Instructors can stop flames before they do too much damage, but not lightning. Some instructors refuse to teach it at all because it is so quick and yet so violent. Some students harm their bodies beyond repair. The lightning twists their limbs and causes their nerves to suffer always from pain, as though the bolt is striking them over and over again forever. Weremages turn into other creatures, and learning to do so can be a painful process, said Sylvan. When the pain is too great, most of the time it merely breaks the weremage's concentration, reverting them to their natural form. But sometimes, rarely, the pain is so great that it breaks a weremage's mind. Terror keeps them from dropping the form, and they lose their own consciousness in the beasts. Oris turned to face the darkness, her grip tightening on her sword. So it's human? I would argue that it is not, said Sylvan grimly, but it is certainly dangerous. Fine, said Oris. How do we hunt it? Sylvan blinked. We're not hunting it. We have to go. Oris whirled on her. We're not leaving. Kara was alive. Flip looked at her aghast. When we saw her, yes, but she must be dead now. We're contracted to protect her, Oris told him. We'll be in quite enough trouble for Ombi. We have to try to save her at least. Sylvan, how do we hunt the thing? I can tell the Lovers Guild you did all you could, said Sylvan. My master's influence will have some sway with them. You are not lying to the guild on our behalf, growled Oris, and it would be a lie because we haven't tried all we can to save her. Now for the last time answer me, or I'm setting off into the stronghold alone. How do we hunt this creature? Sylvan gave her a very odd look. Oris did not think she looked angry exactly, but she could not read what the woman felt. Flip, on the other hand, looked suitably chastised, which pleased Oris a little. By your word, Oris, said Sylvan. Let us hunt then. Flip absolutely would deny the obvious just to get Oris to roll her eyes at him. They set off into the darkness together, Sylvan speaking quietly to the both of them. It is something between beast and human. We should therefore expect an animalistic instinct, but crossed with human wit and cunning. We must think not only like a hunter in the wild, but also like someone tracking down a fugitive. We found one of its nests, but it will have other places to retreat to, like a lord withdrawing to their keep when an enemy has taken the walls. An apt metaphor, said Flip slowly, yet I doubt it would be living in the keep here. You saw it when we came in. It has mostly fallen to ruin. So another high place. Oris's brow furrowed. A high place? Why? Flip shrugged. Because it's part human. Because it's part human, a beast might not take a high position to spy anyone approaching, but a human certainly would. Clever, said Sylvan. The tower should be this way. Come. That is pretty much her constant mental state. She led them down 2 turns to a long hallway. The right-hand wall was all solid stone, but on the left side there were several doors. Oris guessed they were walking along the stronghold's outer wall, and the doors on the left led to some of the other buildings along the edge of the main courtyard. But they had not gone very far when a powerful stench struck them all, wafting out of the darkness ahead. Dark below, said Oris, covering her nose. What is that? Flip sent his flames a little ahead of them to light the way. A corpse. Look. The body lay propped against the wall, just next to a door that hung crookedly on its hinges. There was no way to tell if it had been a man or woman or twixt. So much of the flesh had been eaten away. What meat remained was infested with maggots, and they crawled through the body and across the floor surrounding it. Dark below, said Oris again. Her gorge threatened to rise, but Flip pulled a handkerchief out of his pocket. Holding it over his mouth, he approached the body. There he retrieved something Oris had not noticed at first. A bow and a quiver of arrows, undamaged and resting on the floor about a pace away from the corpse. I have my magic, he said, but it can't hurt to have a weapon to hand other than my dagger. I'd rather not draw within arm's reach of that thing if I can help it. A wise choice, said Sylvan, and the corpse tells us the creature is almost certainly this way. Wonderful, said Flip, with all the false cheer he could muster. I'll be behind you, then, if it's... The crooked door behind him burst off its hinges. It slammed into Flip, throwing him into the opposite wall. His flames guttered out, and the hallway went pitch dark. Oris gave a battle cry and held her blade before her, but she could see nothing to attack. Sylvan screamed. The beast roared. Something heavy struck Oris's arm, jostling her to the side. She fell, and her hand came down on something. The something seemed to crumple, and Oris felt wet things moving. The corpse. Her hand had come down on the corpse, and the maggots feasting on it. She retched. Oris! Flip's voice pierced the dark. Suddenly his fire surged again. Oris cried out in fear as she saw the corpse's face only a finger's breadth from her own. She scrambled away. Flip's spell wavered, from fear or from wooziness at the blow he had taken. The light flickered on and off again. In the flashes, Oris saw the creature had borne Sylvan to the ground. Its claws were wrapped around her blade, and nasty, gnashing teeth were almost upon her throat. Now she got her first good look at the thing. It was indeed bear-sized in height and length, and its head was something like a bear's, with rounded ears and a heavy, short snout. But the knees bent the wrong way. The claws were long and straight, long as knives and just as sharp. It looked like an awful hybrid of a bear and some demon of the darkness below. With the thing visible at last, Sylvan lifted a sword and plunged it deep into the creature's chest. It roared in pain, but then its eyes flared and the wound sealed itself up. Oris had seen that before. A weremage's gift, she thought. The same magic that let them alter their bodies also let them seal their own wounds. Oris slashed it across the flank with her sword. It reared up, howling with anger again. One of its limbs smashed Oris in the temple. She fell, stunned. With a cry, Flip threw himself onto the creature. He wrapped his arms around its neck and wrenched. It gave a choked gurgle as it fell off Sylvan, but then it rolled with the motion. As it righted itself, one paw lashed out into Flip's chest. He was flung across the hallway and face down. His fires died again. In the darkness, Oris heard the creature screech. Then she heard Flip scream, loud and long, and fading like Kara screamed as he grew more distant. The thing was dragging him away. No, she screamed. Flip, Flip. This is going to be the coolest fucking scene when it hits the screen, whether it's, film or TV or whatever. Now, if I was the mage in this situation, I would light the body on fire, so at least it would hopefully keep the room dimly lit. That's actually a really clever idea. That's really fucking clever. I'm willing to excuse Flip not thinking of it in the moment of panic, considering the fact that I've written and edited this scene like a dozen times, and I didn't ever think of that. But that's really fucking smart. Hold for a moment, growled Sylvan. Her voice was somehow deeper, gravelly, probably from the exertion of holding the creature back from her throat. Oris barely saw her silhouette appear in the doorway the creature had come through, and then there was a heavy crash as she opened another door. Cold air blasted through the space, bringing with it weak daylight. Now that Oris could see, she scrambled to her feet, but she was still woozy, and she almost fell over. Come on, she told Sylvan. It took Flip. We have to... Hold, said Sylvan, her voice still thick and raspy. Charging off is what got Flip snatched. Take one moment to breathe. She took Oris's shoulder, but Oris threw off her arm. We don't have a moment, nor does Flip. Come on, take your blades. She went and scooped up Sylvan's swords, which had fallen in the fight, and then her sword belt. But as she straightened, holding the belt in her hand, how'd her sword belt have fallen off? No, that doesn't even really make sense, does it? Something had fallen from one of them, something small and silver attached to a chain. Oris bent again and picked it up, holding it in her hand. It was a symbol. Oris did not see it all that often, but she recognized it at once. 3 rods bound by a ring. And wings behind them. She looked up at Sylvan, fury building in her heart. You're a mystic, she spat. Of course I am, said Sylvan. Of course? Of course? You never said a word about it. And would either of you have come with me if I had? You know we wouldn't. Well, there you have it. Oris seized the front of Sylvan's jerkin and slammed her against the wall. Sylvan did not resist. That was a pretty lie you spun about your parents, she snarled. I suppose you would have said anything to earn our trust. Sylvan looked up at her. She was smiling, but Oris almost felt afraid of her. It was no lie. That stopped Oris short. She blinked. What? The mystics killed my parents, as I said, and everyone else I ever knew. I celebrate the day every year, the anniversary of my freedom. You cannot imagine what they did to me. Oris felt that all the wind had gone out of her. This was all too much for her to know what to think about it. She loosened her grip on Sylvan and stepped away. Our arrangement is over. We save Flip and then we're done, and we'll keep the gold you gave us in payment for your lies. We are not done, Oris, said Sylvan. Whatever you think about my order, someone still wants you dead. We're the only help that will come to you. Some will wish to use you for their own ends, said Oris. That's what you told me at the river. Now I know who you meant. I'm going to double check that that's actually what she says. Some will want to use you for their own ends, said Oris. Some will want to get used by you. Some of them want to abuse you. That's what you told me at the river. Now I know who you meant. What is it they say? The mystics have silver tongues, but they are forked. The enemy has followed you since Wellmont, as I have, said Sylvan. He will not be stopped. When he finds you, he will destroy you. And if Flip survives tonight, he will die defending you, won't he? Oris took a deep breath to reply, but nothing came out. Her jaw set. Sylvan smirked. But if you come with me, Oris, we will protect you, and we can provide more than protection. Do you not wish to know who you are? I've heard enough about who I am, said Oris, shaking her head in dismissal. Some chosen figure, selected by fate for purposes unknown. I do not mean that, said Sylvan. I mean who you are. Do you not wish to know who your parents were, or where you were born? Oris's eyes flashed as she turned on Sylvan. You don't have those answers, but we can get them, Oris. We and no one else. Quickly, desperately, Oris shook her head. Enough. Flip's running out of time if he isn't dead already, and I don't care about any of that. I'm only a sword for hire. It's all I've ever been. It is not all you will ever be, said Sylvan. Stop, said Oris. I don't care. We have to save Flip. You cannot tell him, said Sylvan. Of course I can, and I will. I mean it, Oris. Not until you meet my master, at least. Flip and I have been friends for years, said Oris. I won't lie to him for you. Sylvan bent. She scooped up the bow Flip had dropped and walked off down the hallway. If you want to know the truth, then you will lie to him for yourself. Sylvan seemed to know where she was going, for she trotted unerringly down the hallway, following it as it turned left and then left again. Oris followed, her thoughts a mess of agitation, but then Sylvan stopped, drawing back against the right-hand wall of the hallway, staring ahead. The space lightened, and Oris could see that it also opened up into a wider area, the watchtower. Can you shoot? Said Sylvan. Oris blinked. What? Sylvan raised the bow and quiver. Can you shoot? She repeated. Passably well. Well, I am awful at it, so take this, said Sylvan. I think the thing is using Flip as bait to lure us into an ambush. I'm going to go after it directly. You must wait for the right moment and shoot the weremage the moment you see an opportunity. That made Oris hesitate. But what if I hit you? Sylvan shook her head. You will not. I will give you a good opportunity. Your job is to take it. And as you have said, Flip is running out of time. Come, quickly. Without further warning, she turned and charged down the hallway towards the watchtower. She gave a battle cry as she went, and, drawing her sword, she slammed them against the stone walls. Oris darted down the hallway to follow, awkwardly drawing an arrow. She burst into the tower only a moment after Sylvan. It was 15 paces tall and square in shape. There were arrow slits, but some of them had crumbled over time, and they let in flurries of rain. A stone stairway ran up to the top, where there was a large platform running around the tower's ceiling. As lightning flashed and thunder crackled behind it, Oris saw movement upon the platform. When the thunder died away, she heard the sounds of scuffling leather on wood. Flip is alive, she thought fiercely, but then her attention went to Sylvan. The mystic was charging up the stairs, still screaming as loud as she could. It worked. Far above, Oris saw the flash of yellow eyes. Then a shadowy form leaped down the wall towards Sylvan. Sylvan tumbled left and out of the way. The monster came to a skidding stop and spun to meet her. Sylvan came at it in a whirl of blades. It batted one of them aside and sidled around her, placing itself between her and the wall. Dark, take the thing, thought Oris. Come on, closer to me, you steer. The creature swung for Sylvan with its claws. She parried a first swing and sliced it across the forearm with her other sword. That made it recoil at last. It drew back, but then it attacked with renewed savagery, knocking one of Sylvan's swords away to fall to the bottom of the tower. It gripped Sylvan in its claws and pressed her against the stair's stone railing. Sylvan dropped her other sword, gripping the creature's wrist to keep from falling into empty space. Through gritted teeth she cried, "Shoot it." Oris hesitated. Sylvan still blocked half the creature's body, but finally she loosed, praying to the sky. Sylvan twisted savagely to the side, prying herself partway out of the creature's grip, its claws tearing her skin. Prying herself partway out of the creature's grip, its claws tearing her skin. The motion put the creature's head just in the path of Oris's arrow. The shaft pierced it in its open, roaring mouth. There came a spurt of blood as the arrowhead pierced out through the top of its skull. For a moment more it stood frozen there. Then it collapsed forwards on top of Sylvan. Together they pitched over the railing and began to fall. "Sylvan!" cried Oris. She lunged back down the stairs, but there was no time to catch her. Seizing the railing, she leaned over, trying desperately to grasp Sylvan's arm, but it was too far. Time seemed to slow. Sylvan's hair floated around her face as though she were underwater. And then Oris realized that Sylvan had slowed in truth. The monster had already struck the ground. Sylvan's hair was being lifted and cast about by wind, not by water. Oris looked up in astonishment. There at the edge of the top platform, Flip's upper body jutted out into the open space. The wizard's eyes were aglow, his hand was outstretched, and his mouth fluttered with his incantations. Blood covered his face and arms, but he was alive, and it was his magic that had caught Sylvan. She struck the stone floor of the tower, but no faster than at a good run. She grunted with pain, but her body did not break. The tower fell to silence, and Flip rolled back out of sight with a groan. Immediately, Sylvan forced herself to rise. She sprinted up the stairs, following Oris, who was climbing as fast as she could. Oris reached the top. There was Flip. His purple coat was stained with the blood of many cuts, though none of them looked mortally deep. "You're alive," she said. "Hooray!" wheezed Flip. Hooray is a little too modern. I could go with huzzah, but that's, I don't know, that feels cheesy. Flip is at the top of the tower. Yeah, it's a tricky one for sure. But basically you've got a tower. Flip is on a platform at the top. Oris and Sylvan come in from the bottom, and Sylvan goes charging up the stairs. Oris is down here with a bow and arrow. The Weremage comes down from the top, fights Sylvan right here. Oris is right here with the bow. Shoots the Weremage. The Weremage and Sylvan both fall down to the bottom of the tower. Then Oris runs to the top to find... when Sylvan falls, Flip from the top casts the spell that stops her from hitting the ground, and then Oris runs up to the top of the tower to join Flip, at which point Sylvan comes up behind her. No, it's a tower. It's a tall, wide open tower, almost like a bell tower. So the whole opening is like the whole thing is hollow, with a stair running around the outside of the tower. So there's a straight fall all the way down to the bottom of the tower. If you fall off the stairway. You're alive, she said. Am I, Flip? Wonderful. Oris smirked, but then she saw Kara. The lover was still breathing. Both her hands were pressed to her throat and chest, and blood leaked steadily between her fingers. Sky save us, said Oris. She ran to the lover and fell on her knees beside her. She tore off her vest and pressed it hard to Kara's neck before gently pulling the lover's hands away from the wound. They rose to clutch Oris's shoulders and tunic instead, smearing them with red. How bad is it? Croaked Flip. He tried to come to them, but he could do little more than crawl. Here. Sylvan had reached the platform, and she went to Flip to pull him up. Quickly she ran her fingers and eyes over him, inspecting his wounds. You'll live. She looked over at Kara. Will she? Yes, said Oris through gritted teeth, pressing harder upon the vest to stop the blood. Together they came to her, Sylvan taking one of Flip's arms to help him. Kara was barely conscious. Still she clung to Oris desperately, and Oris could feel the blood on the lover's hands where they gripped her. Her eyes were half-lidded, and they twitched back and forth as though searching for danger. Flip looked mournful. Oris, can you do anything for her? I'm doing what I can, snapped Oris. I mean anything else. Oris looked up at him, confused. Then her expression turned to stone. From the corner of her eye she saw Sylvan looking back and forth between the two of them. Sylvan looked back and forth between the two of them, clearly aware of a secret in their words. No, said Oris. What else could I do? Sylvan gave her an appraising look. Then she put a gentle hand on Oris's arm. Oris, a word? I'm holding her throat in place, said Oris. Whatever you have to say, I don't think she'll object. Sylvan looked pained, but she leaned in with a hand on Oris's shoulder and brought her lips close enough that her breath tickled Oris's ear. She's not going to survive the night. She will, Darktaker. Oris's voice was shaking with fury. I can save her, and I'm going to. Oris. Oris turned to her with burning eyes. Get away from me, or I'll throw you off the tower like that creature meant to. Sylvan looked shocked, but Flip reached over and gently pulled her backwards. Come, he said gently. You aren't convincing her otherwise. Trust me. We should fetch our packs. Oh, damn. Totally forgot to put my screen up. Oops. Yeah, I mean, there's a ceiling to the tower, but a bunch of like the arrow slits and stuff have crumbled in, so there's rain sort of coming in from the sides and just sort of like blowing in suddenly and everything like that. It's not exactly a pleasant place to be. Okay, now I really am going to go get myself coffee, and this time I know that there is a fresh pot. Be right back. It's a Bodegazilla! There he is, and there he be. Chapter 7. A breaking and binding. Kara did, in fact, survive the night. Not long after they bandaged the lover's wounds, she fell into a restless sleep. Oris remained sitting by her side until dawn, occasionally checking on her bandages. Sylvan and Flip laid out their bedrolls close by on the tower's platform. They made Oris promise to wake them for their watches. Oris made the promise, and then she broke it. The storm lessened some time before morning. The rain never completely ceased, but fell pattering on the roof close above their heads. Oris was glad it did not seem to have any leaks. Sylvan woke before Flip. When she looked up and saw a pale dawn glimmering through the tower's arrow slit, she spoke no word of chastisement to Oris for letting her sleep. I'm almost positive no. No. No, there's no Kara in the book. Instead, she rose and went silently down the tower. Oris wanted to ask where she was going, but instead she maintained an obstinate silence. Sylvan returned a short while later. In her hand, she had a cluster of uprooted plants ending in yeah. Okay. Okay, so shock works. In her hand, she had a shock of uprooted plants ending in small clusters. Shock of uprooted plants ending in clusters of small white flowers. Oh, I'm not familiar with Wiktionary. Wow. Isn't this just etymology, though? Oh, look at that. Personally, I'm a dictionary.com person, I think. This is cool, but it's just... I don't know a better way to say it than it's ugly. She built a fire and set some water to boil, and with the flowers she made a thick mash. At last she looked up at Oris. "It is yarrow," she said. "It will help with her wounds." "I know of it," said Oris. "Then may I?" Oris nodded. Together they removed Kara's bandages, managing not to wake her while they did it, and then Sylvan applied the yarrow to her injuries. Kara stirred at that, her fingers twitching. Oris took her hands and squeezed them gently until Sylvan was done, and then she helped reapply the bandages. Kara drifted back to stillness. Mayhap Oris imagined it, but her breathing seemed to be easier. Flip woke not long after that and came to see Kara at once. He seemed mildly surprised and more than a little guilty to see her alive. "I'm glad she lived," he said to Oris with a sidelong look. "I'm glad she made it," he said to Oris with a sidelong look, "and I'm simply miserable about Opie. You were right about my cowardice last night. Forgive me." "I forgave you before you asked," said Oris, and she meant it. That day passed slowly. Oris sometimes drifted towards dozing, but she pinched her arms and slapped her cheeks to stay awake. Sylvan studied her often, and Oris eyed the woman right back. Sylvan must be wondering why Oris had not told Flip already. Well, let her stew, thought Oris, but if she was honest, she herself was not sure why she held on to the secret. They took the weremage's body outside and left it to the elements. Upon dying, the body had reverted to its original form, a small, pale woman, nude, with long and somewhat ratty hair. After Ombi and Kara, Oris could summon no pity for her, but Sylvan could not stop looking at the woman, and her eyes were dark and pained. By the time sunset came again, Oris could hardly keep her head up. Sylvan came to her. Oris, she said, go to sleep. I will keep watch. I'm fine, snarled Oris. You will fall asleep overnight, said Sylvan, and then you will be angry at yourself and you will take it out on us. It will annoy me. I promise you I will not close my eyes for an instant until morning. You didn't even think she would survive, said Oris. I was wrong, said Sylvan. You were right. Oris's jaw clenched over and over as she matched Sylvan's stare. Flip was watching with a look of faint amusement, but he did not seem inclined to join the conversation. Fine, said Oris. Wake me before dawn. I swear I will, said Sylvan. Oris unfurled her bedroll and laid it just next to Kara's, within arm's reach. She lay down, still looking at the lever. She only meant to blink, but instead she fell into a deep sleep, but not a dreamless one. It's mine, not yours, mine. You're a foolish girl, and if you will not listen, we will do what we threaten me all you want, but this you shall not take from me. Loads of cookies and scripts. It is definitely a clunky website. Dictionary.com. Axel Shelvin, not to be a lesbian, but oh my fucking god. What the fuck is wrong with me? People died and I am just, oh my god, girls. Yes, Danny. See, Danny, you get it. The dream had almost faded by the time Sylvan shook Oris awake, but this memory remained. Oris jerked up from her bedroll, her eyes going at once to Kara. The lover slept peacefully. All was silent. Even the rain had stopped. She turned to Flip. The wizard had spread his limbs in his sleep, one arm and the opposite leg jutting out from his blanket. Finally, Oris turned to Sylvan. The woman, the mystic, Oris reminded herself, was regarding her, and there was a strange expression in her eyes. Oris had seen it before when she insisted on rescuing Kara against Sylvan and Flip's advice. It gave Oris a strange, disgruntled feeling. What? She said, voice still thick with sleep. I'm glad you're a good person, said Sylvan. Oris frowned. What? She said again, now more confused than aggressive. Because of my affiliations, honor would bind me to protect you no matter what you were like, said Sylvan. So it is heartening to me that you are a good person, may have a better one than I am. I would hate to have to serve a raging, self-centered sow. Hey, what's up, my rights? I'm actually I've meant to ask you this every time I am on your channel, but is it Maya or Mia? Because I don't want to say it wrong. I get it because I've been there too many times. Noah Webster. Pull himself. Every time he tries to make money. Is that true, Vale? About Noah Webster? Oh my god. Oris could not suppress a snort of laughter, but her retort was acid. You may not have the chance, she said. I haven't at all agreed to serve you or your mystic kindred. Sylvan's eyes darted to Flip, but he was dead asleep. Please, Oris, she said urgently. Just wait until he wakes and we can speak privately. I cannot risk him overhearing. That's not my problem, said Oris. In fact, I meant to tell him today. It was a lie, invented on the spot, but it felt good to say. Just wait, said Sylvan. As soon as he wakes and can watch Kara for us, let us go off alone and I will tell you everything. Maya, okay, awesome. I forget the biography name, but it's like America's Lost Founding Father, and he's just as delightful as you're hoping. Oh, boy. That's adorable. Just wait, said Sylvan. As soon as he wakes and can watch Kara for us, let us go off alone, and I will tell you everything. Everything you can, said Oris. You've said this before. Everything, Sylvan repeated, holding her gaze. And when I am done, I will answer any question you have. I swear it. Oris's breath had quickened. There were so many answers behind that promise, but then there was Flip. And as if prodded by her thought, Flip began to stir. He blinked hard, sitting up and brushing back his long hair with his fingers. His hand rose to rub his chest through his tunic. Good morning, he said, or a good enough one, I suppose. How is she? Now, thought Oris, now is when you should tell him. He's your best friend. Tell him. She sighed. Still alive, she said. Sylvan and I were waiting for you to wake. We both need to piss. Watch her? Of course, dear, said Flip. He shrugged on his coat and came over to take his position just next to Kara, lowering a hand to stroke her forehead. Come on, said Oris. Sylvan rose to follow her down the tower's stairs. This is the moment where Sylvan lied. I mean, she didn't... Did she lie? I thought she was very honest in the next scene. I thought that only complete honesty would work on Oris. Outside, they were greeted by the first true dawn they had seen for days. Dark rain clouds still clustered to the south, but to the east the sky was clear and blue and the sun bathed their faces. They both stood there for a moment, letting it warm them within their cloaks. She did not tell Oris she was into her. That is true. To be fair, I interpreted it as she promised to tell Oris everything related to the mystics and her being the Lifemage. There are other secrets for sure that Sylvan is keeping, things that will not be revealed until later Underrealm books. Absolutely. Like, why is she so goddamn strong? That has a very specific answer, which I cannot wait to bust out on people, but I don't think that's going to happen for many books. Oris turned to Sylvan. All right, she said, I'll have my answers now. Sylvan hesitated. Her eyes swung back and forth as if they were searching for the right place to begin. Here it is then, she said at last. You, Oris, are a wizard. Oris blinked. Are you mad? No, I'm not. Sylvan smirked. I understand why you would not believe it, but it is true. How much do you know about magic? Do you know the branches? Oris frowned. Flip's discussed it before, but I'm not altogether familiar. There are 4 branches, aren't there? Fire magic, like Flip, were magic, like the beast we defeated, and then there's alchemy and mind magic. That is what everyone is taught, said Sylvan, from commoners' children to students at the Academy for Wizards. But what is hidden from all of them is that there are 2 hidden branches. They are life magic and death magic, though in halls of learning they are called ceromancy and necromancy. Life and death? Those aren't types of magic, said Oris. Those are forces. They are forces. You might as well say they're sky magic or seasons magic. Sylvan shrugged. Who knows but that there might be? No, said Oris, shaking her head. How could there be hidden branches? How could you hide them? If there were wizards out there commanding life and death, nothing could stop that rumor from spreading. That is because there are not life and death wizards, strictly speaking, said Sylvan. There's only one of each at a time, reborn every once in a great while. When they come, it signals a time of turmoil. They are born, they grow in power, and then they clash. The conflict is terrible, and the victor then determines humanity's course for the future, until whenever they are both reborn again. Enfil and his lackeys who tried to kill you, that was the first skirmish in the war. Oris shook her head. No, this is ridiculous. I cannot be that person, that kind of person. Sylvan looked hard at her. Word is spread of what you did at Wellmont. That is how I learned of you, and it is how the enemy learned of you too. But no one was there, insisted Oris. No one saw what happened except Flip and me, and we don't even understand it. Someone saw it, said Sylvan. They did not know what they saw, but word spread, and some of us recognized the signs. Oris began to pull on her braid, running her fingers around its turns, but then she stopped herself. That was an old habit from her childhood, and one she had worked hard to rid herself of. So you want to protect me because I'm the Lifemage, finished Sylvan. Or the Ceromancer, if you wish to use academic language. I don't, said Oris shortly. So I'm the Lifemage, and I'm supposed to battle the Death Mage? I'm supposed to battle the Death Mage? The Necromancer, yes. And who is he? We do not know, said Sylvan. I did not even know he was a man until Enfil called him father. My master had suspected that the 2 of you had been reborn, but we could find no trace of either of you before Wellmont. And who's your master, said Oris. You've mentioned him often enough. He is a man named Jordell of the family Adair, said Sylvan. And for as long as I have known him, he has worked tirelessly to prepare for the war we know is coming. He is a good man, Oris. You will be lucky to meet him, I assure you. Oris folded her arms. I'll judge that when it happens. But fine then, now that you've found me, what about the Necromancer? Finding him shall be its own great challenge, said Sylvan, but it is urgent that we do. We hoped the enemy would have no more knowledge of his nature than you, but it is clear that he knows his destiny and has been gathering his strength, likely for some time. Enfil and his assassins were proof of that. And you, the mystics, you're afraid the necromancer means ill for Underrealm, said Oris? Of course he does, said Sylvan, as though it should have been obvious. He is the servant of death, and we are pledged to his destruction. You likely think of the mystics as servants of the High King's law. That is true in the between times while we wait for your resurrection. But royal service is not our only bond. Our highest duty is to serve life itself. We pledge to do so when we take our badges. We claim it as our highest duty. Most among our order know nothing of the great conflict, and they take the promise as a platitude, but some know. The truth is that the mystics are the personal army of the Ceremancer, bound to obey them in their war against the necromancer. But the necromancer has their own warriors, called the Shades. The last Ceremancer thought the Shades were destroyed, but they have only been in hiding. Now the new necromancer has been rallying them to his cause, growing their strength under our very noses. You need the mystics now in order to survive, just as we need you to fulfill our purpose. Badges? We don't need no stinking badges. Badges, 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 mushroom, mushroom. Badges, 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 badges. Or Sugarhead, you're making my head hurt. I told you I don't care about your purpose or anyone's, and I told you, Oris, that no longer matters. Sylvan's tone was not unkind, but it was implacably firm. Your simple life is gone from you now. The necromancer and his shades will pursue you, and when they find you, they will kill you. But the mystics will protect you. We are the only ones who can. The enemy cannot be allowed to win. If he does, it will be the end of everything. Everyone. Oris snorted bitterly. You paint a pretty picture. Snake! So, D&D group. Circle of Summoning Druid. Circle of Spores Druid. Circle of the Moon Druid. Badges, 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 mushroom, mushroom, snake! I rest my case. I may have hidden truths from you, but I have not lied to you since we met, said Sylvan. And I am not lying to you now. We can keep you safe and we can help you discover who you really are. I do not know who your parents are, but my order can find out. We have every resource, connections you cannot imagine, and we are honor-bound to use them in your service. Something smoldered inside of Oris, and she was ashamed to admit, even to herself, that it was a yearning. Yeah, it was. Who could not wish to believe it, at least in part? Who would not desire the answers Sylvan promised? But the mystics had a fearsome reputation, and not only among wrongdoers and criminals in Underrealm. Let's say I believe you, she grated. What would I do? Nothing more than you have already agreed to, said Sylvan. Come to Drakmund, meet my master. Let him explain everything I cannot, and let him convince Flip. He is very skilled at it, I assure you. And in the meantime, do not tell Flip who I am, and keep him from bolting. Why do you care if he leaves, said Oris. You make it sound as if you only need me. My mission only concerns you, it is true, said Sylvan. But if it came to it, and Flip left, I think you would go with him. And more than that, I think you need him. He is a powerful ally, and not just for his spells. You could do worse than to enter the coming war with Philip of the family Drayden at your right hand. There was some truth to that. She wanted to throw all this at Flip's feet and beg him for help. He was the merchant's son, the one used to working with and walking beside power. She was an orphan and a sellsword with no higher aspiration than a purse full of coin and comfort behind a blue door. Yet something within her said that Sylvan was right. If Flip learned she was a mystic, he would leave, and he would convince Oris to come with him. And then they would die. just because I'm going on to websites, I want to make sure that nothing weird shows up on stream, because you never know. There we go. Okay, that's what I'm looking for. Nani? Hey, what's up, Lauren? Yeah, that was a nice set of books, Lauren. Thanks for posting that in the Discord. I love pretty books. I've honestly wanted to make an actual Underrealm box set. You know what I mean? Like, wouldn't that be fucking cool? Although I will be honest, one of the main reasons that I haven't done that, like I know that it would look cool and everything like that, but I have bought box sets like that before. And while the books are very pretty, the cardboard box eventually just, like, I just kind of throw it away because it gets all trashed, gets its ass kicked, and yeah, that's a good point, Lauren. Later, Maya. Thanks for dropping by. Oh, nice, Erica. Poetry's fun. And I've spent a lot of time on like songs and poems in Underrealm that are very important, you know, like serious and songs of mourning and all that sort of stuff. But it is fun just to write like shitty trash poetry. Like, you know, this is an inscription over a brothel. They're not trying to be super highbrow. All right. The patron of a house. The house. The patron of the house. Oh, right. We were jumping ahead to do this, weren't we? All right. Here we go. And then they would die, and all without Oris ever knowing who her parents were and how she had ended up in that orphanage, not to mention the greater destiny with which Sylvan tantalized her. I'll keep quiet for now, she said at last, but we can't leave Flip entirely in the dark. We must tell him about these hidden branches or what have you. Sylvan's eyes flashed. That may not be wise. It's the best you'll get from me, said Oris. I'd be a fool to trust you, and so I need to hear from him. Let me take the lead in the conversation. I know how to steer him. But before we return, give me a moment. I wasn't lying when I said I needed a piss. Flip accepted the story much more easily than Oris thought he would, and certainly easier than Oris herself had. He asked a few pointed questions, which Oris referred to Sylvan when she did not know the answer. Of course, Oris said nothing about Sylvan being a mystic, and in the end Flip nodded slowly, his gaze distant. It makes sense, he said. You think this makes sense? Said Oris. Flip, if I were a wizard, don't you think we would have noticed by now? Oris, we did notice, said Flip. His hand rose to his chest. We were both at Wellmont. Sylvan's gaze went sharply to Oris. Oris ignored her. I mean before that, said Oris. Wouldn't you have, I don't know, sensed the magic in me or some such thing? Why would I have, said Flip. Wizards rarely show signs of magic unless they are trained. Oris folded her arms, trying not to appear as if she was pouting. Well, I'm glad the two of you have this so thoroughly worked out. Flip smiled, and then he turned to Sylvan. Why did you not tell us from the beginning? Sylvan frowned. I did not want to tell you now, she said, but Oris has been pestering me since the day we met. This morning before you woke, she told me she would not walk another step by my side unless I gave her more. My master will likely be furious with me. Flip grinned at Oris. That's uncommon wit coming from you, dear. But then he grew solemn again. Why have I heard nothing before of these clashes between Ceremancer and Necromancer? I learned history at the academy, and I think I should have heard of something like these great wars you mentioned. Sylvan nodded. This is one of the stranger aspects of the situation. In the last resurrection cycle, the Lifemage won, but the war was so devastating that they wished to prevent it from ever happening again. They exterminated every trace of the Necromancer's forces they could find across the 9 kingdoms, but then they went further. They wiped all mention of the Necromancer from history, from every tome in Underrealm. Only some of their chosen followers were given the knowledge, to pass it down through the generations for when they returned. The High Kings have always known, and they passed the knowledge from one to the next. Some other great figures, like my master, learn it as well, even if by accident. The Lifemage's hope was that in this way the Necromancer would have no support when next they rose and be easily defeated. Flip's face twisted. That's the most foolish thing I've ever heard. Flip, said Oris, I believe her. Oh, I don't mean to cast doubt on her story, said Flip. I mean to say that the Lifemage's decision was impossibly stupid. For one thing, we can see it didn't work. The Necromancer's here, and he's got followers aplenty. Some of them tried to kill us just a few days ago. But more importantly, if no one knows he's coming, how are they supposed to prepare for his return? Excuse me. To Oris's great surprise, Sylvan nodded. In fact, I agree completely. I would have told everyone I possibly could. Even now, I want to tell everyone in the 9 kingdoms, and I would if my master had not forbidden it. Wise of you and foolish of him, said Flip. But so be it. This explains why some noblemen would wish to keep Oris alive, and it's not the most outlandish tale I've ever heard. What tale could you possibly have heard that's more outlandish, said Oris. Flip ignored that, fixing Sylvan with a piercing look. Oris grew nervous. Tell me honestly, do you serve the High King? Sylvan grew suddenly tense. The question was dangerously close to the truth, but she met his gaze. I do, after a fashion, but not directly. It was not she who sent me after you, if that is what you were asking. Flip waved a hand. Very well. Say no more if it'll break your bonds of honor. So long as a purse of gold still awaits us at the end of the road, I see no reason to turn aside. Do you, Oris? I am less certain, said Oris, thinking hard. This is more than we bargained for. I was perfectly fine with our lives the way they were. Flip shrugged and grinned. The world does not exist to grant our wishes, dearest one. Oris scowled and turned away from them both. Of course, because of Kara, they could not go traipsing off at once. The lovers slept all through their second day in the tower. Worse, that night she began to have nightmares, twitching and crying out in her sleep. She woke up once, wild-eyed and thrashing with madness from the pain of her injuries. Oris and Sylvan had to work together to hold her down and keep her from harming herself. It was a terrible sight to witness. To their great relief, however, Kara awoke in truth the next day just before noon. Her voice rasped out in the chill air, startling all of them. Where? She gasped. Kara, said Oris. She scrambled over to the lover, taking her hand. I'm here. Where? Groaned Kara again. Are we? Safe, said Oris. The monster who took you is slain. Kara's eyes closed, and tears began to leak down her cheeks. They moved her gently to the bottom of the tower where they could build a fire. Kara barely spoke at all before falling back to sleep. But that afternoon, some hours before sundown, she woke again, and the strength in her voice was remarkable. She called out, and Oris came at once. Water? Said Kara. Of course, said Oris. She lifted the skin to Kara's lips. Kara drank too greedily, and she had to cough up some of it. I'm sorry, said Oris, brushing it off her cheeks. No, said Kara. Lovely. Wine? Her smile was impish, if weak. I think that would be unwise, said Oris, restraining a grin. Kara gave a whispery little laugh. Her hand rose to clutch Oris's. Thank you, she said. You're doing wonderfully well, said Flip with a smile. Soon we'll be on the road again, the lot of us. Kara smiled at him, but then she fixed Oris with a solemn look. Ombi? Oris's heart dropped into her boots. She shook her head. Kara closed her eyes in grief, but a moment later she opened them and looked from Flip to Sylvan. I want Oris, alone. Flip and Sylvan looked at each other with concern. Oris shook her head. You shouldn't use your strength trying to speak, she insisted. I'm fine, said Kara. And sky bless her, Oris found she believed it. Flip and Sylvan exchanged another glance, and then they drew back and out of the tower. What is it, said Oris, once they were alone. Kara fixed her with a curiously knowing expression. You all talked much, she said. I heard most of it. Oris frowned. You did, she said. We thought you were asleep. It came like a dream, said Kara, but I woke and knew it was real. She gave a cough, followed by a wince, but then she focused again. This life magic, did you use it on me? Oris went stone still. Her thoughts returned to Flip and to Wellmont. No, she said at last. No, I don't think I did. Kara nodded slightly, though it caused another wince. Thank you for saving me anyway. It was all a fog when you came, but I remember what you said, and what they said. Oris swallowed hard. She cast a furtive glance back over her shoulder where Flip and Sylvan had gone. Try not to blame them for that. You were badly hurt, and they were only... Kara lifted a hand, and Oris fell silent. No blame. I would not have stayed for them. I would not have tried to save them. I would have fled, and I would never have regretted it. Her hand rose and took Oris's vest. She pulled. Oris leaned down, confused. Kara could scarcely lift her head, so she had to pull Oris all the way down until their lips met, a kiss that was sweeter than it was passionate. You dove into darkness, for me. I will not forget it. Again Oris gulped, and she felt her cheeks burning. Well, we're contracted to protect you, after all. Kara gave her a knowing smile, but then it faded. Would you lay with me, just to hold me? I keep thinking of that thing. It wakes me. The fear is terrible. It is so hard to sleep. Of course I will, said Oris. Of course. She laid beside Kara, wrapping the smaller woman up in her thick arms. Slowly she felt the lover relax, and when she looked again she was asleep. Oris wanted to move, but she was too afraid of disturbing Kara's rest. And so they remained that way when Flip and Sylvan finally returned to them. Oris, too, had fallen asleep by then. It did not entirely stop Kara's nightmares, but it was better nonetheless. Kara. What a great character. I like her a lot. Okay. That is going to be it for me. Hey, what's up, Swiftness? I have got to be going. I have stuff to do. Excuse me. Oh my goodness, Sislin is streaming. Who all is streaming? Okay, I think Cypher has still blocked raids because of all the shit that's been going on. But if not, I'm gonna try. Yeah, I can't raid that channel. Okay. Sislin streaming. Joe plays violin is streaming. Oh. Okay, I'm gonna flip a coin. I don't have a coin handy, do I? Who are we going to throw a raid to? Ah, we're going to throw it to Sislin. Okay.
Valvoline's first breakthrough in...
Sislin is a cool person. A fellow writer. And Tumblr buddy. So I'm going to throw a raid over that way. Yeah, good. There we go. Say hi. Looks like Assassin's Creed Valhalla, which is a fun one to watch. Just totally murked a guy. Fantastic. Anyway, yeah, I am going to go get the rest of my day started. So thank you all for hanging out. And I will be back on again, usual situation tomorrow morning, Tuesday. Yeah, tomorrow's Tuesday. And I will catch you all then, hopefully. Thanks for coming. Bye.
Must leave this place.
Hey, I got the ship back. Listen. Do they want the stuff back or do they not want the